Hello, welcome back to FPL IQ. I'm Rob, aka FPL Hall. I'm joined with Lucian, teacher FPL. Today we are covering West Ham United. A little bit of a bad season, but then they went and won a European competition at the same time. So you might not sure what you're going to get with this West Ham side, but they've lost their captain and talisman in Rice, but they have got a replacement. But before we get into that, Lucian, how you doing? How you feeling about the Hammers?
Ambivalent is the right word. You know, in one of my drafts, I actually managed to figure out a rotation that involved the West Ham defender. I just now cannot figure out which West Ham centre back will start. So that's really a spanner in the works. But let's just go into the talking points. Let's begin.
So, looking at the starting 11, it looks like a 4-2-3-1 under Moyes. Now, there are question marks over the goalkeeper. Areola for 4 million is, I believe, as of right now, the most popular goalkeeper in FPL. Because he's 4 million. But it still looks like it is Fabianski's shirt to lose at the moment. He has signed a contract. So he's a great option. He's probably the best 4 million unless Turner goes to Nottingham Forest and Henderson doesn't. But to start with, you don't want to use an Arsenal slot for a 4 million goalkeeper. Ariola is still the best choice, but I think Fabianski is going to start. Soufal at right back, Cresswell at left back with Aguerd and Zuma as the two centre backs. Said Rice has gone, and I think they're probably going to go ahead and throw in that signing of Alvarez from Ajax. I think he's going to go straight into the side as a defensive-minded midfielder alongside Souček, with Paqueta as the central attacking midfielder. Bowen on one wing. I've put Fornals on the other, and down the middle it says Antonio, Ings, and Scamacca, but Scamacca has now gone to Atlanta, so it is down to Ings and Antonio. I'm going to delete him from that. And there were rumours again resurfaced about Antonio potentially going to Wolves, but West Ham aren't necessarily a team we might be looking at for our starting 11. You said yourself you looked at them perhaps as a rotation defensively, but what do you feel about this starting 11 for West Ham, especially now Rice is gone?
This is probably the only other team besides Fulham that would have retained their original strategy. The nice part about Declan Rice is that he was not part of West Ham's plan A, at least in attack. So really all West Ham have to do is figure out how they're going to manage the space that Rice has left behind. The thing about Alvarez, at least coming from Ajax, is that he's strong, or at least dominant, centrally, whereas Declan Rice actually manages that left half space pretty well on his own. So it's just a matter of identity. Does Moyes play a single defensive midfielder, play a little bit of a risky strategy, having three central midfielders with Paqueta and Souček in central? Or does he stick with that double pivot and he minimizing the influence of Alvarez in deep midfield? I think the bigger question really comes up front, because as we go into their strengths later, we have to set the premise here that West Ham's midfielders never all fire at the same time. They just have this habit of one winger or attacking midfielder taking over the reins from the other. And it's just a matter of whether we're privy to how well they shine at the right game weeks.
So going into the strengths of this side, it's funny that you should say Fulham, because literally in my notes here, I just put strength. Similar to Fulham, but less so by finishing 4 places lower. Everything just screams mid to lower mid-table for this side. Defensively, they're 11th for goals conceded, 13th for clean sheets, 10th for shots on target conceded, 12th for big chances conceded. In attack, they're 13th for goals, 14th for big chances, 9th for total attempts, 10th for attempts inside the box. So they are fairly priced, and like you said about not really having one player that explodes often, maybe Bowen in attack, defensively they just tick along. They're fairly priced, won't eat a lot of your budget, but they're rarely going to bang as well. You're not going to be excited really about bringing in a West Ham player into your side unless there's a nice run of fixtures and you've got space for someone like a Bowen to come into your team. Any strengths that you want to pick out about this side?
Their home form. Their home form is amazing. And most importantly, their home form actually paves the way for that midfielder to shine. Like when Benrahma was getting all these returns consistently, it was because he was delivering at home. Similar to when Souček or when Paqueta was delivering, it was all off the home form. So away from home, ironically, their best performer is Declan Rice. So really, I think this reliability in attack allows us to use West Ham, for the suitable run of fixtures, especially when West Ham come across fixtures that have like 3 home games in 4, or maybe something with a double game week with a single home game. Those would be fantastic to own a West Ham player. But as of now, at least we know that each individual West Ham player continues to be undervalued. Benrahma, 6.5 million, will once in a while look like he's 8 million as long as we pay attention. Jared Bowen, Paqueta himself, Souček even once in a while will be a set piece threat. We all know what West Ham players look like at their best. And so far, it just goes to show that West Ham will not deviate from their strengths, really. I think it's more about whether Moyes chooses to refine the system he has at hand or whether he wants to try something different. Because if Moyes sees that his current system can win the Conference League, then, well, why change it, right?
So
I think that's,
yeah, going into the weaknesses, I did have it as a strength because they are mid, but again, that is also a weakness in the sense that no one's going to come into this side and sort of be a game changer for you. Not until we see something, a run of fixtures or something that happens with West Ham. Losing Rice is arguably irreplaceable. They have got a good replacement in Alves, but he's not Rice, so it's going to take him time to get used to the system as well. He is a new player. Can he reach the heights of the Premier League? He has Champions League experience, but that's not Premier League week in, week out. But I've also put here that being in Europe again is a weakness, because before, when they weren't in Europe, they had a great season and got into Europe. Then they're in Europe, they're stretched thin, especially in attack, and that's given them the problem that they had a really bad season last season. Is that because of the added fixtures? And now they're in the Europa League. They've gone up from the Conference to the Europa League. That could also hold them back as well. Any weaknesses that you want to point out about West Ham?
I think it's a running joke among people who pay attention that West Ham cannot sign number 9s. Even when Antonio was on fire, you knew that Antonio was never a number 9 to begin with. He was like a right back that got converted into a winger, that got converted into an attacking midfielder. He was a striker for a while. You know, West Ham just they've not had a proper number 9 since, I don't know, maybe Teddy Sheringham. So, yeah, their recruitments of number 9s are a joke, and that's why they pass on the goal scoring burdens to the attacking midfielders. The issue here is that besides their current front three, right, they basically do not have any depth. If somehow, some way, Moyes needs to change games halfway in, let's say he needs to make an attacking substitution on the 60th or the 70th minute, he has Pablo Fornals, Manuel Lanzini. I don't even know if Lanzini is still at the club.
No.
But
he's gone.
So he's really reliant on very few attacking strategies, or at least in terms of player depth. So what we've seen so far, however, is that Moyes does show some flexibility in formation where he can transition into a 3-4-2-1. We have seen some of his wing backs somehow, some way score goals or get assists. Emerson Palmieri is probably a name we should take seriously now. Maybe he officially takes over from the Cresswell creation hub from that sense. So I think in terms of weaknesses, the true weakness here is that West Ham remain a club in transition because they have an old guard that is slowly fading out of the picture, and who is the new generation of West Ham attack going into the new season, that remains to be seen. And that, for me, is the biggest weakness, at least until game week 4, when the transfer window closes.
Yeah, I've just made one change to that. I'm going to say Benrahma again in place of Fornals, but you're exactly right about that attacking depth and the lack of it. Lanzini's gone, but this is exactly why Mbama, the 4.5 million striker, is in over 8% of people's sides as their sort of dead sub place, because he potentially could get minutes. They've got Antonio, who's infamous for getting injured all the time and potentially could be going to another club. Unlikely, but potentially. Ings isn't getting any younger. There's some good praise about that Mbama striker, and he's got minutes during pre-season, quite a lot. But attacking-wise, they're behind, they're chasing the game. Who are they going to throw on to create more chances and score more goals? I think defensively, they've got cover in most positions. Both goalkeepers going for the number 1 shirt, I think, are pretty decent. I don't think Fabianski's a long-time Premier League goalkeeper. Areola is a very good goalkeeper as well. agree with you in the fact that in an attacking sense, they look poor. Especially if they're against the team that they're trying to come behind. But we'll go into the top 3 picks. The first one for me is going to be Bowen. I think he's a talisman. He stands out. 7 million, which I think is a fair price. I would have potentially put him at 6.5 if the likes of, March and Mitoma are 6.5 at Brighton. I thought he could have been 6.5 as well. Seemed like he had a quiet season, but he still picked up 6 goals and 9 assists, 145 points. So even though he didn't seem to grab as many headlines last season as he did the season before, Bowen, I think, is a top choice. Second choice, I've put Areola, 4 million, potentially a starting goalkeeper. He's easily one of the best ones for 4 million you can choose from because there's a chance he could start, whereas other teams, the 4 million player goalkeeper is not really going to have a chance to start. And then just for my third choice, I just put Souček because if you're really scrambling for cash or you just don't want a 4.5 million sub midfielder, I just think he's one of the better 5 million options. It feels like he occasionally finds himself in the box. He's a huge aerial threat and he's really good in the air as well. And he seems to just pop up with the occasional goal or assist. But that is scraping the barrel. I wouldn't be surprised if this season I might have Bowen at some point, or I might even start the season with Areola on my bench. I think that's it. Potentially a defender again if there's a rotation possibility, but aside from that, it's not a great thing for me in West Ham. How about you? Who are you thinking for West Ham?
Benrahma will start his yearly wagon that will last 4 game weeks. It's just a matter of when. It's a matter of when. Yeah. So, I mean, I think the nice thing about Benrahma is that he has a combination of dribbling ability, shooting ability from outside, and penalties. Really, that combination makes a perfect West Ham talisman. So in that sense, I do disagree with the whole Bowen being a talisman. I think long gone are the days where Bowen can actually beat defenders and, create shots for himself. That those are way, way long gone because Bowen only shone when Antonio was a goal threat, legitimately. So now we are transitioning into the Benrahma area. And I think in that sense, the fullbacks, or at least the wingbacks potentially, have a lot more room to improve. I think right now the issue here is that West Ham are arguably a side where their starting 11 mostly are on the decline. Their entire starting 11 from Fabianski to Dawson, who's gone to Wolves, to Cresswell, Soufal, all of these players are stalwarts who were arguably in decline, which is why it was good that, the likes of Scamacca and Paqueta were brought in. Benrahma is the only exception that looks to improve. But beyond him, you are looking at new signings such as Emerson Palmieri as well as Naif Aguerd. I think he's also another centre-back that has rightfully deserved his starting spot over the likes of Kurt Zouma as well as any other West Ham centre-back. I think Ben Johnson is a massive liability. So really it's just a matter of whether Thilo Kehrer can adjust to that right-back spot and make it his own. But beyond that, really, in terms of finding that unicorn defender, Emerson Palmieri still is my second choice behind Benrahma.
And as for traps or players to avoid, in a way, I originally had forwards because there were 3 of them, but now there's only 2. I still wouldn't be looking at a West Ham striker, and the fact that none of the defense have over 100 points, it's just in general, it's a team I would avoid for the first 10 game weeks. In the first 8 to 10 game weeks, I'll usually use my first wild card. And I think it's good to plan for sort of the start of the season. You look for, say, 7 to 10 game weeks. And West Ham just doesn't come into the fray for me at all. I've looked at rotations. I've looked at 5 cheap 4.5 million and under defenders that rotate well. West Ham don't feel like they have a particularly good partner that you can swap them around with. It's just not a team I'm going to be looking at, really. Any players specifically or areas that you'd avoid or feel a trap maybe for this side?
It's going to sound weird, but given the plethora of choices in midfield, in FPL as a whole, right? The entire West Ham squad is basically a trap right now because there is literally no reason to own them at all. Like I mentioned, having a rotation partner, but really right now, after going through the rest of the teams, there are so many other teams that do way, way better at home, such as Brentford, such as Nottingham Forest, and really West Ham's home record pales in comparison. There is a difference, home and away, but it's just not clean sheet worthy, so to speak. So yeah, that entire West Ham squad in general for me is a trap, even though I have my top 3 picks.
And the fixtures that stand out for them, they've got Luton in game week 4, and they've got Sheffield United in game week 7. But the problem with that is they're 2 fixtures, that's great. But all the other rotation partners also have good fixtures in game week 4 and game week 7. So the likes that Everton are a good partner for some sides. They've got Sheffield United that game week. You've got Brentford have Bournemouth at home in game week 4. So just Crystal Palace have Wolves at home. It's just for their 1 or 2 standout games they've got in the first 10 game weeks. You'd only want to use them twice, and those 2 weeks are ones where you don't need a rotation partner, and it just kind of makes West Ham like a moot point, basically. So out of 10, I'm not going to give them a 0 because they're fairly priced. I think they would be mid-table, but it's going to be like a 3 or 4 out of 10. What would you give these guys out of 10?
1 for Mobama. I think Mobama is the only player worth owning.
And no, what about Areola? 4 million.
No, not at all. Mobama, that's it.
Yeah.
Because Fabianski still has to lose his spot to Areola before we consider Areola.
Yeah, a lot of the talk about him came before Fabianski sort of re-signed and sort of recommitted himself to West Ham, and now that's happened. But look, he's not a young chicken. He's getting on a bit. He will get some game time, I think, throughout the season. But yeah. So thanks for joining us for this West Ham video. The final one will be Wolverhampton Wanderers, who have some big news coming in. And who better to do it with than with Lucian, Teacher FPL, who is a Wolves fan. So please join us next time for the last video in this 20 video series. And as always, have a good one.